Webb over at Blanchard. Today, going to talk about ES searching. Probably talk about Lucene search syntax because that's what ES assets are using. I'll talk about the GUI and a couple examples, and then I'll dive on into Kibana and try to show those same examples and mimic what we have. First, to the bottom left here, we can see that I have all my assets. And what is searching in general? So if we go over to the ES search interface and I search with blank, I see everything. This is everything that this user has access to. But what does this mean? What kind of Lucene syntax search are we actually using in the GUI? Well, Dalim has helped us over here. We have some screen help. We can see search features where we can educate ourselves a little more, and particularly the search syntax field. Over here, this gives you a better understanding and dive into what we're trying to accomplish here. But I already took the time and actually saved you all the trouble and went ahead and looked at it myself. First things first is a lot of settings that we can configure in the user profile. I set up one previously here under the administration tab, user profiles. We have this user profile called webinar. Under webinar, if we go to settings and actually navigate to the search field, we can see a bunch of labeled options. We have search substring, search operator, and search screen. First, let's talk about substring search. We can set it to none at the start, at the end, or both the start and the end. Now, what that means is that it's going to be a wildcard. I personally recommend none. Of course, it's going to skew your results, but if you're expecting what you're seeing, it's not going to betray you in the end. For example, if I want an asterisk, I can just put the asterisk at the beginning or the end of my search. And ideally, a lot of things note that if you put an asterisk at the beginning of your search, you have to index in your entire system. I mean, if you have a couple of assets, it's not that big of a deal, but when you get into the hundreds of thousands, it becomes a problem. Also, there are some reserved characters, and these come up with any issues. If you're going to put metadata or anything that you want to be searching, you should probably URL encode it. Of course, that kind of defeats the purpose. Another big thing that I'm applying with my system that you might see something different is this new feature in, I think, overbuilds 9026. It takes the period and it actually makes it treats it as a regular character. So instead of separating and expanding upon periods like it does in spaces, it just treats it as a regular character. So let's talk next about the search operator. Most of the time when I think of a search, I want it to be limited instead of expansive. For example, if I want to search for duck or bird, I'm going to get way more fields than I expect. In addition, it might get confusing because if I'm looking for duck or bird, well, am I trying to include the ones with both or just with the ones with only one? That's why in my scenario, I usually like to use the word and. In addition, we'll talk about more when I dive into Elasticsearch, but ES is using these suggesters. So when you're searching in that general field on the search bar, you're not actually searching just the name. You're searching all the metadata of the file. So for example, I have a screenshot here. This is just one file and it pulled everything. It pulled the upload user, just anything it could grab, and it put it in a suggester field. And that comes into play with that search operator field. Next, I want to talk about the search screen. You can apply a, smart view. And in particular, I have one here. Very simple smart view where I define the file, project name, and all the other metadata that I wanted to conveniently express and show to you guys. So when I look over here and I go to my searches, I'm not just getting a couple of fields. I have all those exact fields that I defined and can make use of them to show and pull the exact information that I want. Now let's talk about some GUI examples. So again, we already talked about all the files because in ES, we are limited to that search user, which will be different in Kibana when it's system-wide. We can also search for file types. Here, of course, we have PSDs, PNGs, and PDFs. So we can just list those are actually indexed wrong. PDF files and PNG files. All right. First, I want to talk about issues with the spaces. So let's say that we're just limiting to the PNG files. If I wanted to find the first file, 1.png, well, that looks all great. But what if I wanted to find 1, 2, 3.png? All of a sudden, we start to have issues. Well, what's funny enough is that if we actually put an asterisk, we can find that file. So what is happening here? Well, ES has taken those spaces and put an ands in between those files. So essentially, what's happening is something like that. And that's just something to be aware of, because normally I would think that the file wasn't there. We can also look at just the PNG files. So let's say that we said 1 or, so we can override that and operator that we hard set. We can also change it to 1 and, but again, it's going to give us all 3 files. We can try 1 and 2, where it's not going to show that 1 file. But again, the spaces do create issues. And of course, here I am showing it in the file name and the suggester field, but you can always limit it down to further by different classifications.
You got PNG and 2 in there, not 1 and 2.
Correct. I was just trying to find the PNG file, not the 1. I wanted to eliminate the 1.png file to show that it was inclusive. Whereas if I went PNG or 2, it would show all 3 of those files. Sorry if that wasn't clear, Fred. Let's see. Another issue, 1, 3. So I'll explain this more in Elasticsearch, but here, this is going to find this file. So it's essentially expanding it out to 1 and 3. Whereas in Elasticsearch, it's not applying that user profile. Again, it'll be a little clearer when I get to those files. Next, let's get away from the spaces and say we want to just find that this image right here, 1_.psd. Well, I go ahead and type it in, and it comes back just as expected. Well, let's play with some wildcards. What if I wanted to say $1, because I know that underscore, I didn't know if it was an underscore or a dash. Additionally, I can use that to show all those images that I want, not just the first one, all 5 in the system. Again, that $sign is going to expand into just 1 character. Additionally, if I didn't know what that the $sign or the underscore, I can put the asterisk in the front. Again, this will index all items, but if I need it, I'd rather have the ability to use it than on every search it running through all those indexes. Another interesting issue with that underscore is, let's say I do 1 image. You think that would be 1 and image, but all of a sudden it returns nothing. The only way to get that image to return is something like this. So of course, if I had those search operators at the start, I mean the ampersand at the start and the end, it would have found it. But it's odd that it doesn't come back when you expected it to. Next, let's look at a date range. So if we start over with our file, we see that we have some creation date. So we can go into, here's all our metadata sets. I like my favorite object here is ES object. This has a lot of interesting things that are already approved when the system comes in. I mean, when the file comes into the system. For example, creation date, as I'm showing in the right-hand corner. But there's some odd things. Let's say that we wanted to find the 23rd. So we go to October and we say, well, October 23rd to October 23rd. But it comes back with nothing. Well, that's awkward. How about just the 24th, 23rd to the 24th? And we're just getting that one date. So what if we expand it? So what's happening here? These dates are not being exclusive. So the 22 is included here, but the 24 is not included here. So behind the scenes, if you were to query Elasticsearch directly, you could put an open bracket or a closed bracket to make those dates exclusive, as in including or not including. But you need to realize that if you have it set one way and you search the other, it's not going to include the 23. It's just something to be aware of. Let's see what else we can look at. Let's clear our research and we start over. We also have,
Brennan,
yes, sir?
just to clarify that, are they actually just, for whatever date you're selecting, are they doing, basically 12:01 a.m. on both dates? Is that why it's not including the 23rd?
Well, it's actually something more like this. So you can have a date like, it'll be clearer when I get into Kibana. So let's say you have
I'll let you do that one.
2019-01-10. So you can, and then it actually turns it into a range like that. Whereas this is inclusive, and this is not inclusive.
Okay.
So it appears that sometimes some dates, Dalim's doing this for the first date, which means inclusive, and on the second date it is being uninclusive. Now, there are different classifications of your time and how you're creating those dates, but Dalim, there's no options to change what Dalim is doing on those dates right there.
Thanks.
So it's just good to be aware of those issues, because if you're searching for something and not find it, instead of contacting someone else because you can't, realize limitations imposed. So let's talk about Boolean values. For example, we have Boolean values. Now note that we want to find all files that have true, so we would check the box. But now if we want to find files that do not have true, notice that it does not come back with those other images, or those other files that didn't have any, because it didn't exist. So it's neither true nor false. Something to be aware of. We also have that other value. We can look at the number string. Now, let's say that we wanted number int 5. Ideally, or what did work in the past, is we can do that range element here, but it's having trouble in this search feature, whereas in Elasticsearch, it's very readily available, and I'll show you more into that in a second. So let's say you wanted 4. So those are available. Lastly, I have an example that I wanted to bring to your attention. Let's say that I have 5 PSD files, and I have a project 123. Well, I want to upload a PDF that contains images 1, images 2, and images 3. So when it comes in, it pulls the metadata from the file and links these images and records it as metadata, and actually associates the file with those 3 images linked. So if I actually did it the reverse, and we go ahead and look at that first image, we can also see that it's linked to any PDF with those images. So in this image, it's 123, whereas this project has 2 images with 124 and 125. So this image would have 1, 2, and 5. And of course, it would link back to that original PSD file. So when I go to head to search, I can just make sure to clear all my filters, and I can go ahead and just search for that individual project. And it not only gives me that PDF, but all the images associated with it. Alternatively, I can search for the other project, P125, and it gives me, again, those images associated with. From here, the sky's the limit. I can make counts and know which images were processed when and where. Let's see, I think that's all my examples. Let's go ahead and we'll dive into Elasticsearch. Well, where do we start? First things first, over in your administration tab under System Tools, you have Statistics. Elasticsearch can basically make use of all the search results in any kind of beautiful field that you wanted to. So if we go up to Kibana configuration, because we couldn't find the item that we want, we have more control here. So first things first is that we would think that Lucene is the same thing inside of Kibana as it is in ES. However, it's not. If we go up to the top right, we can see and get an idea of what the general, because again, this is not Dalim's version of Elasticsearch or of Lucene. This is the general page, and how it applies to Kibana is not always 1-to-1 ratio. So if we look at the next slide, So I have an example here. In a simple ES search with that date creation range, it looks something like this. So instead of just applying this range, it's actually applying a lot of other kind of items to your search fields, which will explain a little bit of differences you'll see between ES search and the Gui and Kibana search. So let's look at those same searches again. Well, first things first, blank. But we'll notice that we see a lot more images than just these images. And why is that? Because again, we have full permissions of the system over here. The only way to limit it is to, let's say, ESPO customer name. Sorry. There it is. So if I know that my user is search, so all these files are what relates. So if we go ahead and add that as a filter, it keeps changing on me, sorry. And we search, we can see that these images match up. Now, of course, the same way that I did in ES, we can add the different fields to make it and look and feel exactly how we want, or we can look at each individual item. For example, here at the top, we click this little dot and we can see all these different fields that we can use to search at the top. Okay, so back to our original. So now that we have our thing, we can do those same different things. We can search for file types, PSD. And again, it's only going to limit to our images. PDF, PNG. And we see the same things that search user would saw before. Additionally, let's try that one.png file search. Again, we do see our same image. Now, remember how we had an issue with 123.png? Well, here, it finds all three of those spaced files. Again, what's happening? It's expanding the files. So if we quote it, we can find it just fine here. What worked inside of ES doesn't work here because it actually pulls all the other files. The only way to do that would be to add those AND operators, because remember, in the user profile, that's where we're automatically translating those spaces into ampersands. Let's see. Here's another one. We had an issue in ES because we weren't adding that asterisk inside of ES. It is adding it here. That's why it can find that 123 file. Again, here's the user the file name. Next, we were looking at that one image file, but look how much stuff we get here. Whereas in ES, we didn't find anything, we find a lot of data here. So again, that user profile really defines the way that you're going to see the search in the Gui versus Kibana. We can even try that next one that we tried. And we see just more information than we are needed. Again, it's that suggester field where it takes a conglomerate, so we see suggester. So for that one file, for example, we see PSD, images, Photoshop. All these images are designed to speed up the search in ES. We're not limiting by a single field. So let's show if we were limited by a single field. Let's go ahead and add a filter. We'll do that creation date example. But here we're not limited by the open and close brackets. We can say is between. And so for example, we can type in from 10:01:19 to 10:31:19. But wait, that's not going to be the same thing. So it breaks. Well, why is that? it's expecting it in a different format than ES was expecting it. So if we go back and edit it and we're confused, we can go to this little accepted date. After flipping through, we'll see that it expects it in these kind of formats. So to change our example, 2019 10/01 to 2019 10/30 to have the entire month of October. And we can see all our images again. So if we want to go and define it between just one day or 2 days, sorry, we'll notice that it is inclusive. So it's 23. I'm sorry, I put the wrong one. We wanted 22 to 23. See, it's saying the same thing, that because it's including this, but it's not including this day. So it's going to start from the start of this day to the beginning of this day is what's happening here. We have a bunch more other options. We can say is 1 23. Now this option will be the start of this day to the end of this day. So it's almost identical between today and tomorrow, except maybe 1 minute. But again, you have to know what to expect to actually get the correct results. Let's move on to the next example. So we'll get rid of the creation dates and we'll look at that even Boolean. So in Elasticsearch, we should just go ahead and type it. Boolean is true. Exact results as we expected. We can also do false, no results found, which is the same thing we saw inside of ES. Additionally, if we didn't know what all that stuff is, we can actually go in here and search to see what we have available. Sometimes it shows up, sometimes it doesn't. And today it is not showing up. We'll skip that. We can also do that number string example. And again, it gets exactly as we expected it. I forgot to test this one, but what I wanted to show inside of ES, yes. So what we can do is these ranges we were talking about. And I'd like to clarify, as Fred was asking more about that date range. What we can see over here inside of ES is I have number, we're gonna do number string, yes. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if we wanted to say 1 to 5, it'll be everything. But if we wanted to be exclusive, I'm sorry, it's not parentheses, it's that. It wouldn't include that 1. Additionally, we can not include the 5. I hope that makes more sense, Fred. And we can also do other kind of ranges as well. Again, this search should be available in ES, but I've been trying to confirm with Dalim when and where it does work. Lastly, the same example we were talking about with link in the reference files. We can go ahead and search that project, P123. And again, it does give us the 3 PSD files and the PDF image. My last example was the other document. And again, from here we can get a count on how many files we do and do not have. And I think that's about all I had. Any questions?
All right, just have a couple of those right now. Does Dalim have any plans to improve the search interface and give some of the options?
Well, actually, yes. So I was doing a little bit of research, and Dalim is actually making search components. Even just looking in here, What were you going to say, Fred, while I'm searching for her?
What I was going to say is we were at a customer's site and that question actually got brought up as well. And they have committed, I don't remember if it was for the beta version, but I should say the first version of ES6, that may be for a release right after, but they do plan on basically at least putting things in the interface instead of being in the profile. So someone can easily change whether they want and or and options like that in the interface instead of having to have someone change their profile, which a user could never do.
Right. Or you have to make 2 different profiles with 2 different settings.
Right. Which
So
again, users that are going to be searching for stuff would never know to switch.
So this is what I wanted to mention. There are custom search fields. I guess this is how Dalim's going to test it before they actually implement it into the real search, but this might be something could potentially do another webinar if anyone had interest on.
Okay. And that's all we have.
I have a couple of questions here.
Right.
Brendan, first, go back to your Kibana search that you had up earlier. And you had the example where you were searching on, I think you had something like AMT slash something or other. And what I'd like you to explain is what exactly that is. I mean, where did that
Which one?
Where did that code come from? The AMT slash even Boolean. In ES terms, where did those come from?
Well, okay, so
You know what I'm driving at?
yes, so the AMT is a metadata set. The number string is the variable, and that this is the actual value. So let's go back to my example. Sorry, I have cap locks on. one_image.psd. If we look at one of these images, we can actually see what is defined.
That's what I wanted you to do too. I was going to ask you to expand that because that helps present that in a more readable fashion.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes it's okay. So here we go, right here. This is the example. So under the metadata set, of course, if we look inside of ES itself and we search, we know that because of how I set up that smart view, that even bool is a variable under the metadata namespace AMT. So if I didn't know how to find it in Kibana, I could search for a file that I knew had it and steal that syntax from here. The only thing that you need to add is to escape that first bracket, because otherwise it translates it into essentially an equal. So this is a single term essentially inside of Kibana. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it was plain that that's actually the namespace prefix from a ES metadata set.
It is the prefix, but it's also
without knowing that it was a metadata set in ES. It kind of looks like some voodoo. There you go.
And
exactly.
I can make them all searchable and available.
Okay, and one other question / comment. Go back to your user profile that you were using. And your search settings. Now, you made the comment that you like to use the substring search of none. And I will say that I think the majority of our customers typically prefer to use start and end. Now, your point is well taken, is in that none will be much narrower. So if you want a much more narrow set of results, that's fine. But I think many of our customers' users do not want to have to put in the extra operators in a search field. So start and end is definitely more forgiving for a user who doesn't want to have to play around with an and or an or an asterisk or a wildcard, but it will return a wider set of results. So
that's a really good point, Mike. And I think it comes down to if you're setting up a profile for especially novice users, just these web users that are going to be searching for files, the at start and end is definitely the preferred setting. If you got someone who's a bit more, a sysadmin type or understands Lucene, understands wildcards, then you want to get the none and let them get fine-tune it how they want.
Exactly. I mean, it depends on who your user is.
Yeah.
I'd like to counter one point to that. When you put the asterisks at the beginning, if I wanted to search for duck and I put DUC asterisks, it's going to search only things that are started with DUC. But if that asterisk is in the beginning, it has to search A all the way to C, and then it has to keep going through every single item. So I mean,
but it really is and we had one of our customers on the webinar confirmed they have it set to start and end, because just without having the controls the way we want the Dalim to put it in there, it's
right.
just too restrictive.
Right. I'd like to
have to know your audience.
About the speed of the search too.
Yeah, it depends on who your audience is, because like Fred said, if you are maybe a more technically minded person, they would do what you did, Brennan. They'd go to none and they would use the appropriate operators. But a lot of regular users who just want to type something in real quick, get some results, they don't want to have to put an asterisk or the word and or. For good or for worse, we do have the ability to tailor the search based on what the user may want to live with, or make it as easy or as techno as you want.
Then I will point out that the middle option at the end always puts the asterisk at the end, so it doesn't index every single item in your database. And if you did need, if I was searching for the word Mike and I wanted asterisk IKE, but if I search for Mike, it wouldn't be like Anamike.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. I think unless Judah, Mike, y'all see anything else, I think that's all we have.
All right. Well, have a good day, guys.
Great, Brian. Thanks a lot. And everybody have a great day. We'll see y'all on the next webinar.